Washington's play calling, there are some questions that need to be answered this week.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hansen. We write for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Now, Lars, we've got a lot to talk about today, and we're just going to start off with this one because we decided to dedicate the Tuesday show to recruiting after Monday was a big recruiting day for the Huskies. So go check out that show, double plug here after the Inside the Huskies one to kick it off. But will Washington's play calling be better this week against Stanford?
I mean, it certainly, I don't think it can be any worse, right? I mean, that was, in fairness to offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb, he completely owned it. You know, I think the explanations were both accurate, right? I mean, you could kind of see the justification, but they were also still a little perplexing because, I mean, for example, his explanation about those fly sweeps of Jalen Polk was, well, we just wanted to get between 2 and 5 yards. And it's like, well,
yeah.
Isn't there a better play in the playbook that can get you 5 yards, like an out route, like some basic even a wheel route to like Dylan Johnson, like anything at that point? I mean, we saw it against so many teams this year where Washington will put a couple of players like Jack Westover and I don't know, Jalen Polk in the backfield just to make the lineup different, make the
defensive line
different. Yeah, exactly. And so there's plenty of things that are in the playbook that he could do. I mean, certainly Stanford won't bring the pressure that Arizona State did just from a bodies perspective. I mean, again, we said it going into the game that Arizona State had 2 of the best defensive linemen edge rushers in the conference, just from a statistical perspective. So it's like, okay, you could kind of see that, but then it was the additional blitzes. It was the additional
just overpowering, really.
Exactly. So part of it is like, will the play calling be better? Probably. But the real question is, will the offensive line play be better? Because I think that is more, I mean, because I remember asking Grubb about not having Jalen McMillan, because again, as I was mentioning, the different alignments that they could have, well, a lot of times it would be Jeremy or Jalen in the back. Jeremy Bernard's been in the backfield a lot. So it's like, if it was a fly sweep to Jeremy, okay, I could see that. If it was an end around to Jalen, okay, I could see that. When you don't have either of those guys and you're getting blown off the ball, that's where the real problem kind of
so I like
snowball.
I like that. And then just kind of to add on to that, another guy that likes to line up back there is Giles Jackson. But when you don't have either of those other receivers, you kind of are a little bit hamstrung by that and can't do it, which is one of the reasons we talked last week about, will we see more tight ends getting involved? Will we see the running backs a little bit more involved in the pass game? And we didn't really, we saw the tight ends get a little bit more involved, not really so much the running backs outside of Dylan Johnson, who's always going to just kind of get his targets at certain points. But it just kind of feels like they're just a little bit strung out by that. And that's kind of why, you want to make sure that Washington's a little bit healthier this week. We'll see. Ryan Grubb seemed a little bit optimistic that Jalen McMillan could play this week. And I have a feeling that while they might want to hold him out and make sure he's ready for USC, which is going to be a much bigger challenge, you might not have a choice but to play him after just the way the offense looked last week against Arizona State. And then Jeremy Bernard, we'll see. I have a feeling that he'll probably be held out this week. And then I think he'll be back and ready for USC, but we'll see. And then the other big thing, you talk about the offensive line, is Julius Buelow. And he's been in pads and just ready to play, or seemingly ready to play, at least in these last 2 games. And I think this is the game where he does make that start again and is kind of back in the starting lineup, which just adds to Washington's depth, which is something you and I have talked a lot about off the air and on the podcast as well, where the injury to Mateo Mele obviously hurts a lot. And the injury to guard Memelar is something that I don't think we've necessarily talked enough about, where this was one of the deepest groups on the team, the interior offensive line, coming into the season. And depth gets tested sometimes with guard going down for the year, Mateo Mele going out for the year, Julius having to miss 6 weeks now with a high ankle sprain, which is somewhat typical, especially when you're a bigger guy like that. You want to be careful. You want to make sure that he's at full strength, especially on just, being able to plant in pass protection. So I think this might be the week that we see him come back. But that's just such a big thing where there was so much depth at this position. And it's kind of great to see that the depth has held up long enough. And I think we just finally saw the breaking point of it against Arizona State.
You're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, again, not to double down on it, but it's like also, I don't think, I mean, I showed you the numbers, the pass rush numbers. Oregon had 19, Arizona State had 18. Nobody else got even close to that this season. So I think it's like there's something that I think either Arizona or Oregon put on film against Washington. It's like, hey, this actually can work. This is how you flush your Penix. You might not sack him, you might not always get to him, but if you just get him off his timing and just overload him with pressure, you can kind of win that matchup without having to necessarily get a sack. So I think the offensive line kind of, that was their like moment in saying, hey, are you guys going to step up? Same thing with the defense a couple of weeks ago. It's like, hey, you guys got to step up. And now they have. Now this is the offensive line turn.
No, absolutely. And I think it will be better due to health, right? Yep. That's just such a big part of this where at times and this is no knock to either player, but a true freshman at center and a redshirt freshman at right guard, while they're both really talented players, I'm really high on both of those guys. But there are certain times where they will get overwhelmed, and there will be something that, a veteran defense and a veteran defensive coordinator will take advantage of. And I feel like that's what we saw against Arizona State. So I think it is fair to say that the play calling will be better going forward. And after the break, we're going to talk about, was this Washington's best defensive performance of the year, and can they build on it? But first, we've got to take a couple minutes here because we've got some fun ad reads to get through. First, we're going to talk about our friends over at Jase Medical because there's a lot of uncertainty in the world today, and it's really important to be prepared for the fires in Hawaii, hurricanes and tornadoes in Florida, earthquakes. Being somebody from California, I know how, we're just overdue for a big earthquake down there. These things can lead to supply chain shortages for medications, or just even the inability to get medications in a timely manner. One of the best solutions out there is the Jase Case. The Jase Case is a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. You can also customize your case and add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. Jase Medical now offers customizability for your Jase Case with dozens of add-on medications, and you can choose the medications that best fit you and your family's unique needs. As they continue to work towards expanding their medication offerings, Jase has added ivermectin as an option to the Jase Case, which is a really great anti-parasitic medication for conditions like scabies and lice. And another thing you can do is if you have a family member who lives in an affected area, you can buy a gift card for your family or loved ones so that they can get the Jase Case of their own. How do you get one? Go to jasemedical.com and enter code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON at jasemedical.com. And, with another game coming up this weekend, we also have our friends over at FanDuel, because you can snap into the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockdown and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. Lars, what are some of your favorite bets just for Washington, whether it be this weekend, maybe a Heisman on Michael Penix moving forward? Is there anything that you're seeing on FanDuel that you really like?
Well, I mean, the one that I will stay away on is probably the line on this game because of how last Saturday went. So I think that would be a good one to stay away from. But there's a couple intriguing
ones. What is the
ones.
line on this game? Is it still
26.5? But
26. Okay.
But if you look around college football, I mean, Tennessee 3.5. I mean, Kentucky, that could be a fighting one. So Kentucky plus 3.5, not a bad bet. There's not a ton of good ones. Arizona State only plus 6.5 against Washington State. So, that could also be an interesting one there, especially with how Arizona State's motivated and you got to get a win against some Washington's team because UW is 2-0 against the state of Arizona this year, so someone's got to get a win. And then
fun fact about that stat too.
Well, here's an interesting one. Another 3.5 spread. Oregon State minus 3.5 against Arizona. That is interesting.
That's
I
like that
because if Oregon State loses to a school like Arizona, when you go into that matchup in Washington, it doesn't look necessarily as favorable and as big as it would be if Oregon State's a top 10 team or top 12 team.
That's true. Fun stat about that Arizona thing. I put it out on Twitter yesterday too. Do you know when the last time Washington went 2-0 against the state of Arizona is?
No,
2016.
I was gonna say it was either 15 or 16, but I think they lost in 15 on the Deontay Cooper. Yeah, so that was
2016 is the last time.
Good year.
That's great year. Now, as we move on here, was this Washington's best defensive performance of the year? Where we've seen some other good ones in terms of like EPA per play and some of those advanced analytic stats. But do you think that this was Washington's best all-around defensive performance of the year? Because I think it was.
I think it was. I mean, the only other one that I would put up there would be Michigan State. I mean, just because that was a road game, and so I think that might be a bigger defensive performance because it's on the road in a Big Ten environment. I mean, again, I'm not saying Michigan State's got a world beater of an offense because they don't, but neither does Arizona State. So they both have serviceable offenses, and the difference was they both had marginal quarterback play and really good running back play, and Washington didn't necessarily shut down Arizona State's run game, but they did enough to mitigate it when it mattered and controlled Trenton Bourget in the pass game. So I think, especially, and again, but here's the thing: if Mish doesn't have that pick six, it's still a good defensive performance, but it doesn't necessarily have the same level of. I mean, let's say Arizona State wins the game, 10-7, 7-6. It's like, okay, yeah, you held them to a touchdown. The offense did literally nothing, so you did more than the offense, but. I don't know. I think there's still a little bit more left on the bone for the defense, but I think this is certainly by far this is like their benchmark defensive performance that you want to build on going into the month of November when you have more legitimate, Utah, Oregon State, USC, you got Wazoo even. These are the 4 games where it's like, hey, your defense is prepped for this. This is now your actual season here. You beat Oregon, you held them to below their season average, so it's like you've been getting better. This was really that kind of plant the flag, hey, this is what we need to build off of. And whether the sacks come or not, I think as long as they're holding teams to 1 and 2 scores, I don't think the sacks matter at that point. I mean, they do, but you'll take the result over the sacks.
Right. They're also like the interceptions have been key. I feel like one of the reasons we haven't should we talk more about the sacks? In my opinion, yes. Something we talked to both Braylon Trice and Zion Tupuola-Fatui today at practice, where they said, there's a point where it's probably a little bit frustrating, but we're still like affecting the game in other ways. Where Zion said there are a lot of times where like he said, I can't remember if it's him or Braylon. Somebody said that I was in the backfield and Bo Nix didn't even get to like finish his drop back before he decided to tuck and run because of what was going on the play. And it's the same thing with Trenton Bourget, where it's there were a lot of times it's forcing a quick throw, forcing this, forcing that, which it's helpful, right? But I feel like if the interceptions hadn't taken such a big step forward, that the sacks would be under a much bigger microscope, because it's just kind of, you have to have at least one of those two, right? Last year they weren't forcing turnovers, but they were getting sacks like it was nobody's business. There's 38 sacks last year, if I remember correctly. So it's just kind of, it's been interesting to see that script kind of flip a little bit. But I think that, especially if the sacks can start coming at a higher rate, and I wrote something about that yesterday on Inside the Huskies, is that this defense can really just take a massive leap forward over the last couple games of the year.
Yeah, and I mean, I was actually looking at the pass breakup numbers and the kind of the main secondary numbers after co-defensive coordinator Chuck Morrell said on Monday. Look at our opponent pass completion percentage. It's one of the best in the conference, and actually, honestly, I think it's top 15 in the country even. So it's like, yeah, you could look at the schedule and say, well, they haven't really played any wow quarterbacks aside from Bo Nix, but it's like, well, again, it doesn't matter. I mean, you could play a nobody and still get lit up if you don't execute your defense properly. So I think the fact that, I mean, all 3 of their passive defense, pass breakups, and interception totals are already beyond what they were last season through 7 games. So it's like, last season you get through 13 games and don't even get near where they've been this season. So I think if you're Washington, you take the turnovers over the sacks, because although sacks can lead to, punts and better field position and things like that, nothing replaces just straight up takeaways. So
right, absolutely.
No matter where you are on the field, and especially the way that they've done it this season with Misha's pick six, some pretty timely turnovers and things. And they also got turnovers that they didn't get credit for. So there's a few. It can actually be even better.
Like the forced fumble,
yeah,
Michigan
exactly.
State.
Yeah, exactly. I've harped on it so much. I'm just going to just state it as a fact at this point.
Also, sorry, just kind of to that, to your point. There have been so many people like, oh, like the refs are what won Washington that game with that no call. Like there have been multiple points this season where Washington has also been jobbed by the refs. You can't act like this is just a one-way street.
Well, not only that, but that whole game was just, nobody asked DeBoer about penalties and the officiating in the game. I think almost because we could kind of see. I think even Dillingham said that he was okay with it because he was having good conversations with the referees, and it was almost like, hey, look, we're just letting everything go. Like we're picking up everything. I mean, the one to Jalen. I mean, think about it, the one to Jalen Polk where he gets mugged by two defenders and then fumbles on the next play. It's like, okay, like there's consequences to some of the stuff. So it's like, because if you get that play, maybe you still fumble, but you're almost I think you're at the 25 or at the 20 at that point.
Yeah, you'd be, a lot closer to the goal line.
Yeah, because it wouldn't have been a spot foul. It would have just been
15
10
yards. Yeah,
exactly. So, and again, but what did I tell you when we were walking away on Monday? If you're both Jabbar Muhammad and if you're Arizona State's defensive backs, if you know that you can get away with it, or if you have a sense, hey, this is how they've been calling the game, we can get away with it. As a coach, you actually would rather have them commit the penalty. I told you this about Elijah Jackson earlier in the season, where it's like you'd rather give up the holding penalty or the pass interference for 10 or 15 yards than give up a touchdown, because, I mean, you don't want to, but if you can give up that penalty and then get a stop and they punt it or you get a turnover, that penalty doesn't necessarily hurt you. Whereas if you give up a touchdown, that hurts you.
Right. And Jabbar Muhammad actually had some really, really fun comments about the no call on that play. He just said, yeah, they picked up the flag. So, got nothing to complain about there. We'll end up posting the full video probably on Twitter and on Inside the Huskies. But yeah, he had some very fun things to say about that one. And just, I think that this is going to be a really great, just kind of building week for the Washington defense, because Stanford's offense has shown that it can score. They put up 40 something on Colorado. I can't remember the final score of that game off the top of my head, but they can score at times, right? So it's something that everybody who we talked to on Tuesday just kind of had to share that same message of, we can't take this game lightly. Like they always have things that they can do well. Especially Zion Tupuola-Fatui referenced they always have like a 6'8" tight end and a 6'7" wide receiver that they can just throw the ball up to, which, I mean, yeah, that's just kind of the Stanford thing. But this is a really great building week for Washington's defense, because if they can show that they can build on last week's performance, maybe get to the quarterback a couple of times, that would just be really, really crucial heading into the USC game next week. So it's just, it's all about taking those steps.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, speaking of Stanford, they actually have a running quarterback.
Yeah.
And it's not Andrew Luck. It's like, it's more of a, he's not as good of a passer. So we kind of have to have him as our design runner. I mean, I think Stanford's used 2 quarterbacks this year.
Yes,
I'm not
they do.
mistaken. So this is also a really good test for both types of quarterbacks that Washington has been able to play this season, where they've been able to manage, for the most part, that running threat. I mean, Bo Nix didn't gash him as much as he did last season. I'm trying to think if there was any other running quarterback that's truly threat. I mean, Noah Fafita was okay, but he was better as a passer than he was as a runner. So I think
Taylon Green had his moments.
Right, exactly. But if we got to go all the way back to Boise State, I mean, I think that kind of proves the point there, where it's like, you're as long as you're not getting just absolutely and it's not like Stanford is a world beater with that not spread offense, but that running offense. So I think this is, exactly to your point, a good week to say, hey, look, this is the kind of good test. It's not a big test. It's not like a hard test, but it's also a hard test because you have to bring your own energy to the library. Like, you have to go study. You have to really want to do this. You have to want to be at the library. Nobody wants to be at the library on a Saturday night. So it's like the fact that you got to be there, you got to bring it on your own.
I respect where you went with that take. I love it. And then, coming up next, we're going to talk about, is it Rome Odunze for the Biletnikoff Award or Maserati Marv? Because we're going to talk about a great tweet. I had to get the Maserati Marv in there because we're going to talk about our friends over at eBay Motors. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. So, speaking of Maserati Marv, we have to start this segment with this RJ Young tweet that he put out there this morning. Or RJ Young on Twitter says, 1. Marvin Harrison Jr. 42 catches, 766 yards, 6 touchdowns on the number 3 team in the nation. 2. Only one Power 5 wide receiver has more yards, touchdowns, and plays on an undefeated top 10 team. Rome Odunze. 3. Ohio State hasn't had a Biletnikoff winner since Terry Glenn in 1995. So that means Rome Odunze should be the Biletnikoff favorite, right? That's what are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously this is not a knock on Rome, right? But when you have your father as Marvin Harrison, that it's the name cachet, it's the Ohio State cachet, it's the, hey, we are gonna pump up Marvin Harrison until he literally has a 1 for 11 yard game. Like, 1 catch for an 11-yard game, where someone just absolutely shuts him down. It's just like Rome hasn't been shut down.
Morrison kind of did.
And former one-time UW lean Ben Morrison, like, shout out Ben for that. Man, shout out Jimmy Lake for not getting him.
Sorry, continue.
Okay, couldn't help myself. But I mean, we talked about it before the season, where it's like if Washington does what Washington should do, Rome Odunze is going to have to be a massive part of that. There's so much to where, and again, it also depends on the left arm of Michael Penix. But even in games where Rome Odunze has been quote unquote shut down, he's had like 80, 5-6 catches, 80, 90 yards. I mean, what's his worst game? Yeah, I gotta look it up. I should probably should have done.
So I'm pulling up the stats right now. What do you think that outside of Indiana and Ohio State season opener where they scored 30 something points, Marvin Harrison Jr. had 2 catches for 18 yards in that game against Indiana, and against Notre Dame he had 3 catches for 32 yards. That's
and Rome Odunze's worst game was, depending on how you view worst, Arizona when he had 5 for 64 and no touchdowns, or this past weekend when he had 5 catches for 82 yards and no touchdowns. But other than those 2 games, 132, 107, 180, 125, 128. So it's like he's still producing, and his worst game is a 64-yard game in which they still win the game, and Michael Penix, I believe, did not throw a touchdown in that game. So it's not like Rome got shut down. They just went to a different game plan to beat a stingy Arizona team in the desert. So it's like there's just kind of things you have to do. But unlike Harrison, where he just disappears for what, like you said, a couple of catches for a couple of yards.
I want to be fair to him. I don't think that's all his fault, because his quarterback play has been spotty at times this year. But I wanted to throw another stat out, just kind of in favor of Rome Odunze. Rome Odunze is 4th in the country in yards right now. He has 45 catches for 818 yards, 6 touchdowns. The only 2 Power 5 wide receivers who have more yards than him are Malik Nabers and Luther Burden at LSU and Missouri, respectively. And they both played an extra game. Rome's played 7. They both played 8.
And you also have to look at both of those offenses are predicated upon those two receivers. I mean, Missouri's offense is Luther Burden. So it's like,
Right.
and not that Washington doesn't predicate on Rome Odunze, but when you have
For sure.
Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk,
Jalen
even
Poole. Yeah.
Jack Westover goes for 3 touchdowns against Michigan State. So it's like, but the point of it is Rome is able to create those openings for other guys as well, in addition to making the hard catches. And also, I mean, gets the game winner against Oregon, gets, massive play after massive play. So it's not like he's just getting stats, but not necessarily impact plays, right? And doing it against, Boise State, Tulsa. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
right. It's like you should do that, right? But in the games where it's really mattered, when the play is on the line and they need a guy to go to, it's Rome. And Rome is the number one guy at the top of the list, not just because he wears number 1, but because he
Right.
is wide receiver 1 in the country and for Washington.
Absolutely. And to a point, because I don't want to make this sound like we're knocking Marvin Harrison Jr. That is absolutely not what we're doing. Like there are scouts who have him as the number 1 overall prospect in the 2024 NFL draft class. You can't we're not knocking that. But in terms of this year, in terms of recognition, what Washington's offense is doing, a lot of it starts with Rome Odunze and what he's able to do because he's done everything for the team this year. And he's been so productive, exactly what you said, Lars, in the biggest moments. In the first big, true road test of the year. We know how that game turned out. Rome went for 9 catches and 180 yards, and he did most of that by halftime. There's just when Washington, you're right, when Washington needs a play, they turn to Rome Odunze, and he shows up time and time and time again. And that's not to say that Marvin Harrison Jr. hasn't, because he's an insanely talented prospect. But between those two guys right now, because I feel like that's where it's going to come down to. And then, of course, Malik Nabers and Luther Burden deserve to be mentioned in this conversation also, in terms of the Biletnikoff Award. But just the gap, there should be, I think, a little bit of a gap between Rome Odunze and the rest of the field right now because of just what Washington's offense has been before this Arizona State game. And even then, Rome still had himself a fine game, truly.
Yeah, exactly.
And just the rest of the field. No, that's all I'd say.
Exactly. I mean, I think at this point, and he's still got a minimum 6 games left, and he's already got 818 yards. So, he's gonna get
blow past last year's totals.
Right, exactly. So he's probably gonna end with what?
1,400 yards.
I was gonna say 1,400 might be a little high, but certainly 13 and certainly 1,200. So I think that will be enough. And I mean, not that stats are everything, but you just want to see that consistency week over week, year over year. And he did it last year, living up to it this year. Wasn't even recognized until midseason last year for the Biletnikoff Award. Now he comes in as one of the odds-on favorites sort of thing. And I think that's kind of a testament to, hey, Rome needed some things to get better in the offseason, needed to get bigger, needed to kind of attack the ball more than he already was. And he's done exactly that. I mean, it's like, if you're an NFL scout, obviously Marvin Harrison's one. Okay, there's no debating that. I mean, just lineage, physical specimen, ability, who he is as a person, all that, right? But Rome Odunze really is right there. I'm not saying he's going to be the number 3 pick in the draft, but I'm just saying if I'm a team in that 5 through 12, 15 range in the draft, and I can't get Marvin Harrison, I am very happy getting Rome Odunze. It's like, yes, obviously, it's almost like, would you rather have Caleb Williams, Drake May? It's like, okay, Caleb is the generational talent, but Drake May might arguably be the better quarterback depending on which team drafts him because of the system he's going to, because of the talent around him. Caleb is doing magical things at USC, and yet they're still not exactly all winning where they should be. So I think it's a matter of just they're 2 great talents, and I think first of all they should both be finalists. That's the clear answer here. Rome Odunze and Marvin Harrison are probably your top 2 favorites, and then it's just kind of them battling it out for who wins it, with Malik Nabers and Luther Burden battling out for who is option 3 or 2.
Right, and I want to take that a step further before we kind of wrap up here, because Rome should be considered as a top 15, top 20 pick in this draft. And I feel like that really says a lot because once we get to draft season, we're going to have a field day on the show. And me particularly, I love draft season so much. And I know, Lars, you're a fan, but I know I'm just like a nerd and I take it to the nth degree. So I'm sorry for what's coming your way. And I know you know this too. But this is a really special wide receiver class because we've talked about Marvin Harrison. We we discuss Rome Odunze all day long. Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk, we'll kind of see where they fit into this discussion too, because they deserve their flowers. They do. But then you have to talk about Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson at Florida State. You got to talk about Emeka Egbuka at Ohio State. Malik Nabers, Luther Burden is in this conversation now too. And if you just kind of look around the country, there are so many, like Tez Walker at North Carolina is somebody who's going to get a lot of love, and as he should. Dorian Singer down at USC, Jacob Cowings at Arizona. Like there are a whole lot of really, really talented receivers. And I feel like that's one of the reasons that we need to make sure that Rome Odunze is at the forefront of this Biletnikoff discussion, even though I've seen him on some Heisman top 10 lists, which I don't hate that at all personally. But it's just that this is such a special wide receiver class, just such a special group of players that Rome Odunze, he's special enough, and everything that he does deserves to put him at the forefront of this conversation. And that's all I got. Do we have a Lars's final thought today?
No, I mean I completely concur. Again, this is not a bash Marvin Harrison because Rome Odunze and we cover Washington, right? I think it's just like, hey, like here's the national perspective is always going to lean Marvin Harrison, Ohio State, until Washington literally beats Ohio State in a big time bowl game, and Odunze and Harrison get to kind of battle it out for who is the better receiver in the game. That's truly the only way you're going to answer this question, and maybe they will.
Absolutely. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers out there who just, you guys are what really make the show run. We truly appreciate all the support that you've given us throughout these first couple of months, and we're just going to keep just pushing our very hardest to make sure that this is the very best show for you each and every day. And if you want to get on the conversation, best way to do that, leave us a comment on Twitter, or just, leave a comment in the YouTube video as well. That it's all really, really helpful for us. And if you're not an everydayer yet, we'd love for you to become one. There's so many easy ways for you to do that. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever you're listening to this podcast, we are there. Feel free to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Leave us a 5-star review, like the video, whatever it is. And again, leave us a comment. We do appreciate it all. And again, thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you on